Hello, everybody. Welcome inside the tap room. It is happy hour. My name is Brew. I am, as always, your bartender, and I want to thank you very much for joining me on this reasonably low-profile episode of the tap room. Today, joining me for happy hour is nobody. There's nobody joining me today. This is going to be one of the very few episodes where it is just me giving a bit of a monologue and talking about what has happened in the last week. And I gotta say, refreshingly enough, if you pay attention to the news at all, it's actually been a pretty quiet news week, which is nothing short of a miracle, considering the relentless pace of the news cycle the last, I'd say 5 years, 6 years. There's just been something to talk about every day, and that hasn't been the case these last couple of days, these last couple of weeks. COVID cases are slowing down. Good job, everybody. Keep wearing your masks. Keep getting vaccinated if you can, and if you know anybody that can get vaccinated, make sure that they do. And if you are one of those people that has gotten vaccinated, please make sure to continue wearing your mask and follow the basic rule of being a good member of society. Don't be a dickhead. Other things happening in the news. There's going to be another stimulus check incoming. Right now they are just talking about whether the cutoff point should be whether you make $50,000 or $75,000. I am unaffected by that one way or another, so I will be looking forward to getting another stimulus check, and I have spent that money preemptively on upgrading some quality of life things for myself as a student, a streamer, and a podcaster, and gotten some upgrades for my PC setup, including the reason why I might sound a little under the weather is because I am suffering from a bit of an allergy attack. I got a new hard drive for my computer because I was wrestling around with only about 220 gigs of storage, which when you're messing around with hours upon hours of video and audio footage, I will tell you right now, you go through pretty fucking fast. And it was also the first time since I built my PC last May that I actually cleaned it, and holy shit dust. So I'm in the throes of a not insignificant allergy attack related to all of the dust that is still very much in the air of my room. But having 2 terabytes of storage on the hard drive that I have dubbed the Porn Master 5000, which there is no other reason for that name than it is a joke. 'Cause why not? Moving on down the list, I've got a major gripe with one of the biggest news stories that came out this last week, and it pertains to my favorite sport of baseball. Baseball. What the fuck is happening right now? There is yet another just debilitatingly slow news cycle in the offseason. There used to be a flourish, a whirlwind of moves on the first few days of free agency, but free agency has been going on for several months now, and one of the biggest names in free agency was just signed. Trevor Bauer, the current reigning NL Cy Young Award winner, just signed a contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I have thoughts on this particular contract. If you do not know what the details are, I assure you they are ludicrous. The man signed a 3-year contract with 2 opt-outs, meaning that he can opt out after the season this next year and the year after that. It is a front-loaded contract worth a grand total of $105 million, which is still a lot of money. That's $30 million a year. But the breakdown of it is silly. He will make $40 million this next year and $45 million the year after. It is a genuinely stupidly large contract. He is now the highest paid player in MLB history, and it's not even a close second. Several $1 million separating him from anybody else. And he's good. Do not get me wrong. He is a very good pitcher. He is now 30 years old, so when he re-enters free agency after the second year of his contract and making $85 million in 2 years, he is going to be only 32, which gives him plenty of time to seek even more ludicrously large contracts. But the big gripe that I have with this contract isn't whether or not he's worth it. It's debatable. Just going off of what he did last year, he did pitch excellent, play excellent baseball. He 73 innings, 100 strikeouts, an ERA of 1.73, which is absurd. And he did it for the perennial disappointment of the Cincinnati Reds. So, I mean, good for him. I don't have much of an issue with him signing with a superpower team. That's kind of how it goes in baseball. What issue I have is with the competitive imbalance that is created by baseball for no other reason than they're kind of lazy and have an epic history of mismanagement. Baseball is the only major sport that does not have a salary cap. Football, basketball, and even hockey all have salary caps. And what this does is it actively limits how much money a team can spend on its players and its coaches. Now, this might sound like a dumb idea, but when it actively takes money, disseminates it throughout the league, it creates an ability for smaller market teams to be able to compete in an otherwise big city, big market dominated media and escapist form of entertainment, which is sports, where big market teams in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago have always been able to dominate for a very simple reason. More eyes get drawn to those teams. And when more eyes are on the teams, they're able to have higher priced tickets. They are able to have higher budgets for their media productions, for their TV broadcasts, and they're able to make more money from TV contracts. What the issue becomes is that allowing for a team in baseball without any form of salary cap, they have kind of a soft salary cap where you need to pay luxury tax on any amount of money you spend over a certain amount per year on your payroll. Teams don't care about the luxury tax. It's a soft cap for a reason. No team gets particularly subdued by the threat of needing to pay some extra money in taxes just because if they can sign that one big name guy, they're gonna do it. Baseball needs actively to join with the rest of the sports world, because if big market teams can continue to spend money the way that they do, it actively limits smaller markets from being able to compete. Smaller markets cannot charge as much for advertising, therefore their TV deals are infinitely smaller than their big market rivals. And teams like Milwaukee are never going to be able to spend nearly as much money as teams in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Chicago. They just can't. And the big issue with Trevor Bauer's deal is that at $40 million, They are spending more on Trevor Bauer alone than some baseball franchises will be spending total this coming season. And that, Jeff Passan, who I traditionally agree very much with on his takes, I differ with him strongly on this one. He decided to say that maybe the fact that some teams are spending less on their entire budget of players than the Dodgers will be spending on Trevor Bauer is more a comment on the teams that aren't spending that much. That is laughable. Teams that choose not to spend money in baseball, they do so at their own peril, and they know this. Tanking in baseball, unlike other professional sports where you fail to perform well, you get a high draft pick, and those draft picks have immediate returns. In basketball, when you get the number 1 overall pick, that number 1 overall pick is almost certainly going to be starting for you that season. In baseball, the number 1 overall pick often languishes in minor league systems for 3 to 6 years. You will not see these players for a long time. And putting a competitive team on the field in baseball is so much more important than other sports, because you will not grow in baseball unless you are able to attract free agents. You can have success in basketball and football without attracting top free agents, but you almost are certain to fail if you cannot attract any free agent talent in baseball, because you are never going to be able to build solely through trades and through the draft, just because of how long it takes these prospects to be able to reach baseball and actually perform at the level that they are predicted to. And there's a much higher percentage of players that get drafted with high expectations that fail to live up to those expectations in any meaningful way in baseball than there are in other sports. This is just because of how long it takes for players to become competitive at the major league level in baseball than in other sports. And teams not spending a lot of money, it's hardly their fault, is it? These are smaller market teams that are not able to compete with the amount of amenities and things that the Dodgers can offer when they can offer $40 million to one player. And this is just after winning the World Series. They just cannot compete with that. They do not make as much money from ads. They do not make as much money from tickets. They do not make as much money from naming rights on their stadiums. They do not have the revenue flow in order to be as competitive in the free agent market as large market teams. And baseball, for decades, has actively emboldened this practice where big teams just get bigger. Big market clubs like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Angels, the Astros, they do not stay bad for nearly as long as smaller market teams do. There are so many numbers that back this up. Really, the anomaly would be the Astros, who lost 100 games 3 straight years, but then they are now a perennial World Series favorite, whether they are cheating or not, because they have been able to spend money in free agency. They have been able to make good trades to bring more players in. They have drafted phenomenally well. I should say not so much that they have drafted phenomenally well, so much as the draft picks that they've made have panned out, which there is, again, no guarantee of in baseball more than in other sports. So, if there is anything that can be taken from this Trevor Bauer situation, it is that baseball has such a laughable competitive imbalance that they do nothing, absolutely nothing, to fix year in and year out. It penalizes small market teams, and it makes it so much more difficult for those teams to retain top-level talent than it does for a big market team that drafts a Christian Yelich who can easily hold on to him. When a smaller market team gets one of those guys, it becomes very difficult to build a competitive team around them because you understand that you are going to be investing a large percentage of your salary into that one player. Salaries in baseball are getting out of fucking control, and it is making it very difficult for teams to continue to exist in a meaningful way in markets like Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis. It just is. I'm going to hop down off of my soapbox pertaining to baseball, and of course you knew that I was going to need to talk to you all about the Super Bowl. My God, what a piece of shit. This is going to be a reasonably short podcast because while there's not a whole lot to talk about, Kyle Rittenhouse is going back on trial. His trial's starting pretty soon here. He fired his lawyer. The impeachment starts tomorrow. There's not a whole lot that I can say about that. It's almost certainly going to he is not going to be convicted. That's how it's going to work. Stimulus checks are incoming. It's just a question of when, not even a question of how much. There's not a lot to talk about. And with no guest lined up, I had hope that I would have been able to get some members of the Brew Crew involved in this one, but they are dealing with personal things, and one is at work still, so you're stuck with just me. Now, I watched the entire first half of the Super Bowl, a game that I had no meaningful interest in, and you know what? It was so lame. The NFL got what it wanted. Tom Brady won another Super Bowl, but that first half was just it was boring to watch. It wasn't fun. The refs were hyper involved. They were super sensitive. Tom Brady looked fine. He looked like Tom Brady. He played like Tom Brady. But my God, was the Buccaneers defense all over Patrick Mahomes. He ran almost 500 yards just to escape sacks. 500. That's absurd. It's the most ever. The man was running for his life, and if you watched any of that game, or any of the highlights, you probably saw some of the most impressive incomplete passes ever. There was one where the man threw the ball when his whole body was off the ground, parallel to the ground, and it bounced off the wide receiver's face in the end zone. It was going to be a touchdown, and this man was barely off of the ground himself. It wasn't a fun game to watch. It was boring. There was nothing really to it. Tom Brady gets his win, the NFL gets what they want, and that's really all that there is to talk about. The refs were way too involved. The officiating was horrible. It was just straight up bad. There's not a lot to talk about there. They were ticky-tacky for the Chiefs, who would get a penalty if they breathed on a Buccaneers player in the wrong way. And the Buccaneers were able to get away with some of the most egregious offensive line holdings that I have ever seen. I am not saying that it was rigged. I am just saying that the calls were pretty one-sided. And that is the nature of the game. Sometimes the officials they catch something for one team more than the other. There's not a lot to make of it there. I'm certainly not a conspiracy theorist. But it didn't get better after halftime either. It didn't. What I watched the whole halftime show, and the audio. Now I am an audio tech, so I say all of what I'm about to say from a position of I know what the fuck I'm talking about. It was dog shit. It was almost unlistenable. It was so bad. I could not believe my ears. The production was bad. It sounded like the way that it was recorded, or broadcast, I should say, was through a single mic that they stuck in the middle of the stadium and just broadcast whatever the mic was able to pick up. It didn't sound good. The Weeknd's performance was fine, but it was hard to move past how bad the audio was. You have to make sure that your audio is crisp and clean. I have worked concerts. I know how to record so well, so easily. But my God, did they raise the mediocrity to a new standard with that performance. The game itself was so bad, and the halftime performance was so mediocre, that the way that my brother and I spent the second half enjoying the game was by not watching it. And we instead watched old halftime show performances. And I think we were the winners. Really, the best that I can say about that game is that the only true winners were people that didn't spend a lot of time getting invested in it. Tom Brady gets his win. He gets his 7th ring. And I heard another stat that was just absurd, besides Patrick Mahomes running for his life for 500 yards, is that Tom Brady, for his 7 Super Bowl championships, if you walk back a couple of them, you will notice a trend. He has won in 2021, in 2019, in 2017, and 2015. The man on odd number years has won 4 of the last 4 Super Bowls. Why? What is it with odd number years that apparently Tom Brady just awakens in a way that is not unlike a bear? And that's all that there is to it. The whole game boils down to the Buccaneers defense made Mahomes run for his life. Mahomes ran for his life. Mahomes' receivers dropped the ball so bad, so often, so many times. It wasn't a good Super Bowl. But there is one thing that I am excited to see in the days to come, is that this year the Super Bowl is very different from in years past. Analyzing how many people genuinely watched any particular game or program, but specifically a sporting event, is very difficult for a couple of reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is that there is no adequate measure or way to measure just how many people watched because of parties and bars. When analyzing the ratings for any particular game, they can only analyze how many televisions were tuned in. There is no way to figure out how many people were actually there and watching that TV, though. And the reason why ratings matter is it determines how much that network can charge for advertising. Now, the single largest amount of money that any individual program charges for advertising is the Super Bowl. And a 30-second spot during the Super Bowl for a national advertising spot. They do have certain allocated number of local spots that are much cheaper and usually just pull from a pool of different advertising spots that there are available. They are much cheaper, but for a national spot, CBS has been known to charge over $1 million for a single 30-second spot. And this is because the advertisers get that much money worth from having that many people watching the ad. That is what they care about, getting eyes on advertisements. And in years past, there have been a large number of gatherings in bars and house parties watching these games. And at COVID 2021, we have people that were going to be watching at home that would have ordinarily been going to larger parties or filled sports bars. That didn't happen. People stayed reasonably responsible, which says actively to media watchers like myself that there are going to be more televisions tuned into this game than in other years. People wanted to see Tom Brady and people wanted to see Patrick Mahomes. They didn't get a very good game, but whether somebody tuned in for 10 minutes or for the entire time, advertisers got what they wanted. People watched. And in higher numbers, I estimate, than in years past, simply because there are going to be more people that watched from home that would have been going to parties. Meaning that one party or that one bar where there would have been 2 or 3 TVs on for dozens of people, those dozens of people would have been staying home and watching on individual TVs. So it would have been dozens of TVs instead of dozens of people watching 1 or 2 TVs. And my estimation is that next year for the Super Bowl, since we are going to have a pretty good estimation finally of how many people actually watched the thing, my guess is look for advertising charges to explode. I am guessing, honestly, that how much CBS will be charging for Super Bowl advertising spots is going to be probably 2 to 3 times more than what they had been doing. So I estimate that there will be that many more people watching the game than we think, and we are going to finally have a good idea of just to the degree that that is the case. Now you'll have to forgive me again. I'm dealing with an allergy attack, so my thoughts are a little disjointed, but I needed to get this thing out. That is all that I have to talk about on this episode. We covered a pretty good range of topics in this last half hour. This nice long monologue. If you want to know what I have written down for a script, I have actually nothing. This was all off the cuff. So I hope I didn't miss anything. And if you are offended, I want to know why or how I didn't present anything in a controversial way. But I hope that you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of the Happy Hour. My name is Brew. I have been your bartender, and I am closing down the tap room for the day. I will see you next week, hopefully on Sunday when it's supposed to be out. But I couldn't very well talk about the Super Bowl in past tense when it hadn't happened yet. So that's why this episode is coming out. I don't know if it's going to be out tonight, on Monday night, or on Tuesday. But I'm closing down the tap room. I am clocking out for the night. I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I will see you on the next episode of the Happy Hour.